Lori says, Justin Trudeau's friend, David Johnston, to be paid $1,400 to $1,600 per day on a part-time basis, plus travel and living expenses outside of his residence from now until December to investigate the alleged foreign interference by China in 2019 and 2021 federal elections. To be fair, grocery stores' prices are a lot higher. So like a $1,400 to $1,600 per diem now is like, a $200 to $400 per diem in 2014 or something like that. I'm just kidding. But inflation's rampant. I think that's probably paying David Johnston too much by a huge amount of money. This is a reminder that David Johnston, when 2006, when he was the president of the University of Waterloo, he was opening up Confucius centers. It seems like there's a bit of a conflict of interest inherent in this investigation. What kind of investigative history does he have? How many investigations has he headed into international spying rings and things like that? Oh, yes. It's every other Tuesday for me, right? I read a James Bond novel. Rex Glacier is responding to all of this as well. He says, Trudeau hires his lifelong family friend to stall on calling a public inquiry into China interference, and Trudeau decides taxpayers should pay his friend $48,000 per month to clear his name. And this isn't a problem? Oh, it's a problem. Yes, it's absolutely a problem. Why don't we have an opposition that's actually dealing with this? I have no idea. Oh, I don't know. Maybe they'll try. Who knows? CTV News is reporting further intel on interference rapporteur Johnston's mandate made public, including per diem. Why are we having an 81-year-old come out of retirement to investigate over months on this thing? Oh, yeah, well, apparently he has to do an initial report by May, but he's going to do ongoing reports, which is exactly what I said was going to happen until December. So they're going to have any time they want. They can have this guy pop up with new news. Oh, the special rapporteur is going to make an announcement. Oh, the special rapporteur. Did you hear about the special rapporteur? And so anytime there's something like hot under the collar for Trudeau, right? More than Chinese interference? Yeah, right. Anytime anything like that happens, they'll trot this guy out. And so Pierre Poilievre did himself a disservice by not giving himself the power to trot out his own special rapporteur, who might actually be investigating things. The person could actually be somebody in law enforcement, somebody with experience investigating things like this. He could actually be useful. Or you could put somebody who's completely useless. You could nominate Don Cherry just to lambaste how stupid this whole thing is. Either way, you could have had power and a cudgel to hold Trudeau accountable in a funny way or a real way, and you chose neither, right? If everybody appoints special rapporteurs, then they have no meaning. It has no meaning anyway. It's ridiculous, and I'm disappointed the press is going for it. But now we're on the hook for this money, so I thought you should know about it and what you're getting for this money. Additional intel on what foreign interference special rapporteur David Johnston will be empowered to dig into and access in terms of secret documents has been made public, as has his per diem for what's being described as a part-time role. I know I make $48,000 for my part-time roles. That's right. That's why I do this show. Not at all. $48,000 a month. I mean, isn't the guy well taken care of already for being the special rapporteur? If you grabbed an RCMP guy who's got like a great track record at cracking cases and, investigating people, would you give him $48,000 a month? I would say probably not, right? How come there isn't an RCMP team? Brenda Lucky and her crack squad. Right, sure, sorry. Obviously not. She's retired. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, back to the article, has already announced that the former Governor General would have to present an initial report by May 23rd, advising on whether a public inquiry or other mechanisms or transparent processes are necessary. The House of Commons already voted on a public inquiry, saying, we want a public inquiry. We need one now. Let's have a public inquiry. And they're dragging their feet. May 23rd. We have to wait until May 23rd. It's more than a month away. Today's April 7th. Happy Good Friday, by the way. Back to the article. Then up until October 31st, he is to release reports on a rolling basis on issues related to shoring up Canada's democracy as they arise. Whenever they need somebody to pop into the news cycle and say, oh, we're doing great things, we're doing blah and blah and blah, and it doesn't matter because all they needed is a distraction for the day, right? And the special rapporteur will act in that manner. Here's everything we need to know about what Johnston is being asked to look into and how much he's set to be paid. And then I just scrolled down because I wanted to go over how much he's being paid part-time and what costs will be covered. According to one of the Order in Council documents, Johnson is being employed on a part-time basis between March 15th and December 12th. It states that his per diem pay is within the range of $1,400 to $1,600 per day. In line with federal policy, Johnston will also be able to expense travel and living expenses within Canada if he hits the road as part of his work, the cost of expert staff as required, and any other reasonable expenses as necessary to complete his assignment. What will he have access to? The scope of access is expanded on the new documents, indicating that Johnson can review any relevant records, including documents protected by cabinet confidence. But I'm interested in what kind of, if he's allowed to relay what he sees or not. Because sometimes, oh yeah, you swear to secrecy, you can read it, you can know and tell everybody that's fine. Right? Or you can know and tell everybody what it said. There's different things. Those are different things. And often it's the first one, not the second one. Back to the bullet points. Work with any recognized political party in the House of Commons to learn how information flowed and what actions were taken. Speak to the Commissioner of Canada Elections and the chairs of national security oversight bodies, NSICOP and NISRA, about their work. Engage with the PCO, the Prime Minister's Office, CSIS, the RCMP, Communications Security Establishment, and members of the Security and Intelligence Threats to Election Task Force or the Critical Election Incident Public Protocol Panel, CEIPP, to understand past recommendations and steps taken. Feds say reports will be public and get a response. In the preamble to outlining Johnston's access to resources and mandate, the Order in Council states that the federal government recognizes the cardinal importance of enhancing Canadians' trust and confidence in their democracy by ensuring the integrity of Canada's electoral processes and democratic institutions. The preamble also notes that there is a desire to respond to the evolving threat posed by foreign interference through a strengthened approach. They're going to use this as an excuse to bring in speech protocols online, protections or crackdowns on certain things here or there, saying hate or election interference is happening online, and in order to protect Canadians from election interference, foreign election interference, we need to do X, Y, Z, and you lose a little bit of freedom, but you gain safety, right? Which is exactly the trade they always make, and it's always false because they cannot guarantee your safety. In fact, the things they're doing are threatening your safety, not enhancing it, period. And it's obvious, but people don't want to accept it, I think. Just like the dollar stuff that I'm going to show you, I think it's happening. And I don't know how to convince anybody that it is, because it's very, well, I mean, it seems nothing's happened up till now. So it seems like confirmation bias. Nothing's happened up till now, so nothing will continue to happen. But I think things are happening and people don't realize it. We'll talk about money in just a minute. Opposition MPs says feds are stalling response to foreign interference information request. The fact that no information has been provided despite repeated follow-ups appears to be a deliberate effort to obstruct the committee's study on foreign election interference. They've got to wait until there's special rapporteur who's getting a buttload of monies in place, right? Here is a little bit more Chinese interference information. A little drip. I don't know if this has nothing to do with the CSIS leaker. This is Larry Brock, and he says former CPC MP Kenny Chiu warns that Beijing's objective is to either control or remove politicians who oppose them. He personally was targeted and felt that the Trudeau government did nothing to protect people like himself. We'll listen to the first minute and a half. I think it's impactful, and then there are questions after that. It's also worth listening to, but beyond the scope of today's show. Here we go.
Because of language barriers and cultural challenges, we have diaspora communities that feel most comfortable with and even exclusively consume ethnic media contents. The communist regime has successfully monopolized Chinese ethnic media, either through complete takeover or being co-opted via the carrot and stick approach with business interests. With the successful execution of this strategy, CCP has effectively controlled the diaspora community's hearts and mind. In the long run, it perpetrates a false narrative of a complete equivalency of the Chinese Communist Party, China the state, and Chinese the race. Therefore, criticizing the CCP will quickly escalate into anti-Chinese racism. With that long-term foundation laid and continue being laid as we speak, the regime can activate their political influence by spreading and seemingly authoritative commentary or news stories at their right time. Their goal is twofold: to install a decision makers that they have access to or control of, or to remove those that stand against their efforts. Unfortunately, in my humble opinion, Canada has run out of time in dithering and procrastinating. This is not the moment for more talks and virtual signaling, but legislative actions that aim to protect Canada, your home, and home to many cultural communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chu.
It's very interesting how he's talking about the carrot and a stick method, the use of racism as a foundation to say, if you criticize the CCP, if you criticize Chinese communism, you're criticizing China and Chinese people, and you can't do that. That's very racist. You can't do that. We've seen that as protection in some of the accusations that have been flying around, from Global News to Han Dong and Chen as well. And there was another one that claimed racism when they were followed up with it, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head, so apologies about that. But it's interesting to see the strategies discussed from people who are targeted with these strategies and saying, we don't have time to dither. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what Johnston's mandate is designed to do, stall, because really this government should have fallen when we found out that there was Chinese interference in our elections, really. Brandon says, who is this Canadian MP? We need to get behind him. This is at the National Inquiry hearing. He actually addresses the WEF, Klaus Schwab's cabinet penetration and the call with bad audio connection. So I think that I don't know who is influencing who. If the bigger fish is the CCP, or if the bigger fish is the WEF, or if they're competing, or if they're on the same level and there's somebody above. I don't know. I don't know how that all works, but it seems like there are certain news blips, there are news things that happen that seem odd. And I showed you when Parliament was virtual, right after Klaus Schwab said we'd penetrated the cabinets, there was an MP who asked about this. And the Speaker of the House said, "Oh, your audio is terrible. We'll get back to you soon." Blah blah blah, and moved on. And we never heard from him again. We never heard another follow-up question about that again. And these things are concerning. So this goes into the China thing, because I think that there's interference in Canada in more than one aspect, in more than one way. Even I think the triads have their own interests and their own political mechanisms in place in order to further their interests. And I think probably the Chinese government is well aware of it and lets it go, because it furthers the chaos and confuses things for their operations, right? So I think there's probably a lot more in play, more than China, more than the triads, more than just the WEF. And Canada's stuck. We're the rope in the tug of war. You and me, and the rest of the tax-paying citizenry. We're the rope. And maybe if it breaks, they get access to all the resources, et cetera, that we're currently not using to our advantage, that's for sure. Anyway, let's not get waylaid. Here is the MP, and this is the National Inquiry testifying there in Toronto. So here we go.
We know that Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, had made a comment that we have penetrated over half of the cabinet, and he said that rather casually, and he seemed quite happy about that. The comment had come up once in Parliament, asking the question relative to this connection, and immediately there seemed to be what appeared to be a comment or an excuse to some microphone-related problem. That question has never since come up by any party in Canada. It is very concerning because it appears that there are members possibly in other political parties as well relative to the World Economic Forum and those things that go on in the World Economic Forum. I'm not going to comment specifically on what things go on, but I will say that criminal conspiracies do happen. You are not a nut for calling something a criminal conspiracies. I've investigated criminal conspiracies, and they're real, and they really happen. Organized crime is not some old Italian guy in a wife-beater shirt talking about the mafia, or somebody in a leather jacket riding a motorcycle. Organized crime now is very sophisticated, and generally those people that are very, very wealthy with incredible power and access are positioned very well to be very effective criminally.
And we all know that the mafia doesn't exist. Right? That's what they're supposed to say, right? Are you in the mafia? The mafia doesn't exist. I think that it's interesting. Organized crime does exist. The hot fuzz doctrine in play, right? So the hot fuzz doctrine, of course, is yes, there's a conspiracy. Yes, everybody's in on it. And absolutely, they're going to deny it until they're caught outright, right? Hot fuzz, the whole town was in on the conspiracy except the viewer and the main character, right? Everybody else knew what was going on. And like Scream as well. If you're watching the movie Scream, you're in the dark about the nature of the conspiracy, but the conspiracy is multiple people dressing up as the Scream character, spoiler alert, and killing people, right? And so once you know there's multiple people, everything makes sense because now the killer can be in two places at once, right? Like the person who you thought was the killer is now hanging out with friends when the killer shows up. Bam, it's a conspiracy. These things do exist. They do happen. And the Scream thing less, but it does happen. Hot fuzz conspiracy more. And it's interesting that people dismiss it when we watch it in media so often, when we see it play out in countless, well, there have been political scandals and people get upset about it, but it seems like every political scandal that's real, we're not allowed to get upset about. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, Tucker Carlson, let's talk about money. Let's talk about the US dollar being the reserve currency of the world. Tucker does a 15-minute segment on this. It's worthwhile. I'm just going to do it for a minute. The link is in the description. Sorry, yesterday I had to run out. I had something in the afternoon, so I had to run out. But the links are there now, and I try and put the links in after I publish, but some days happen. So sorry, guys. Remind me, and I'll come back and do it as soon as I can. But here's Tucker talking about money, and it's important. Here we go.
For nearly 80 years since the end of the Second World War, the US dollar has effectively been the currency of the world. For our entire lifetimes, there was virtually no place on the entire globe you could go that would turn down a 20. Andrew Jackson's face beside the famous seal of the U.S. Treasury was probably America's best-known export. From Dar es Salaam to Sri Lanka to the smallest gold mining outpost in the Amazon basin, every shopkeeper on earth recognized a $20 bill. The dollar was universal, and not just universal in commerce, though the majority of international transactions were conducted in dollars, but universally held as a long-term store of value globally. The world's central banks stockpiled US dollars, far more than any other currency. Now, most Americans may not have known that, or they did, but it doesn't matter whether they knew it. It was very good for everyone who lives here. Because there were so many US dollars in circulation outside of the country, the cost of borrowing money inside the country remained artificially low. And that's one of the reasons that in this country, America, middle-class people could buy their own homes. The U.S. government, meanwhile, was able to run up astronomical debts without many obvious consequences. Now, from time to time, the Congress would debate something called the debt ceiling, but it was abstract. For most people, the entire topic didn't seem very relevant to their lives because, for most of that time, it really wasn't. America printed the U.S. dollar, we controlled the global reserve currency, and that meant that for us, money was cheap. We had privileges that nobody else in the world had. It's been very nice, but what would happen if it ended? You don't even really want to think about that because the consequences would be too ugly, really ugly. But we started to worry about it about a year ago, really the day the Russian military rolled over the Ukrainian border. Now, by itself, that was a destabilizing event. War always is destabilizing and always challenges the existing order. But it was the West's reaction to the Russian invasion that seemed ominous. Policymakers in the U.S. went insane. Joe Biden, helped by his Republican allies in the Senate, appeared to be determined not simply to topple the Russian government in some kind of regime change war, but to blow up the post-war economic order that had served the U.S. so generously for so long.
That's the kind of in a nutshell. Sorry, a bit longer than a minute and a half, but I think worthwhile to kind of give us the totality of what's going on. How important U.S. dollar being the world reserve currency. Now, I think that Americans being able to buy their own homes didn't necessarily have to do with the dollar being cheap. Americans would have been able to buy their own homes post-World War II just due to the cost of materials and housing materials and all of that other stuff. I think that regardless of the cheapness of money, I don't think that were Americans taking out loans to buy homes in the 50s? I don't know the history of that. So apologies if I'm speaking out of my bum here, but it seems like Americans didn't necessarily rely on the cheapness of borrowing money for their initial wealth post World War II. Now, that may have been true or gotten true in the 70s or something to that effect, maybe. But fundamentally, it's a very important aspect of U.S. foreign policy to have the world reserve currency. And Biden seems intent on, as Tucker said, blowing up that world order in order to bring in the new one. And here is this guy talking about BRICS and the original BRICS and the expanded BRICS and how quickly things seem to be coming together. I don't know if he has any reason to be misleading people about this. It seems legitimate from what I've been seeing as far as news reports and updates on Twitter and people talking about how this is shaping up. And you're not allowed to talk about this. This is the same as talking about, hey, I've heard the vaccine's hurting people, and you're a nurse, right? Like if you say, hey, have you heard about BRICS, and you're a financial guy? Shh. We haven't heard about BRICS. Nobody's worried about it. Everything's fine. SWIFT is fine. Everything's good. So interesting, right? Here we go.
Off the rest of the world. We've been the bully with this thing. We're now a credit-based economy. In other words, we print fake money and we spread it throughout the world. But the rest of the world is actually producing the food, the gold, the silver, the machinery, and all this. So finally, the rest of the world said, enough's enough. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That was the original BRICS. And now they're gaining force.
It's not just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. You have well over a dozen countries that have already applied, such as Algeria and Argentina and Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Nicaragua, Turkey, Indonesia, Senegal, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Egypt, Kazakhstan, and the biggest one of all, Saudi Arabia, has formally applied to the BRICS nations. Kazakhstan, Indonesia, Thailand, all of these countries and their neighbors that are growing together are forming a massive, very imposing, not only from a GDP, but you put all these countries together and their military might is very, very strong as well. And those are the BRICS plus. Now they're talking about adding more countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Bolivia, Chile, Cuba, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, Azerbaijan, Mongolia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. The list goes on and on.
So the rest of the world is saying, enough of you sending us your toilet paper.
That's exactly right.
You take our materials.
Right? And so people are not happy with how the U.S. is behaving. And they're pushing back, and now they have a real alternative and a military power that can defend the alternative. And if you look at money as projection of power into the world, which that's the latest theory, that's the software theory, then a grouping of people in a new monetary system needs protection, and the protection is those governments' armies. And it seems like that's a good bet. And they look at that and they say, yeah, that's a bet I'm willing to take. Those guys versus the United States, sure. Right? And that's interesting, right? Very interesting. And part of what's going on in the United States is happening in Europe as well. The destabilization of the countries through importing migrants. This was shared by Jordan Peterson. This was shared on my Locals channel, talking about how he wanted to spread the word and let people know what's going on. And basically, this guy's talking about how, well, we'll play the last minute here.
Homes. They're not doing it yet. They're not ordering it. There is a law in the Dutch books that in a case of emergency, you'll have to take people into your homes, right? And they're prepping this now in the news cycles. Like, you know, they're not doing it, but just to put that in the back of your mind, one lady that lives in a big farmhouse after her family is gone and her husband has died, she doesn't need that big farmhouse. She can bring in some Somalis to live with her, right? They're prepping a replacement strategy. It's right in your face. It's right in your grill. I was down in Morocco last year watching the Moroccan government push people to Ceuta and Melilla, which are two Spanish cities that are in Morocco. And I was down in Greece watching the Turks push them over the border into Greece. I was up in Lithuania watching Belarus. That's when I started warning that something was about to happen. When we saw the Belarusians pushing migrants, they tried to push them into Poland. Poland did not allow it, of course. And then Lithuania allowed some in. I was up there for 5 weeks. The Lithuanians gave me complete access to their camps because I know people in the Lithuanian army because I was with them in Afghanistan. So they gave me complete access to the camps. and to the border and to their intelligence people and their army and whatnot. And this was a clear weaponization of migration. It's weaponization of migration. This has gone on since forever.
Very concerning stuff. And like I said, the purpose of having multiple people from multiple different backgrounds is to have the divide and conquer done for you already. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. You can check out full episodes of Canada Poly every day at CanadaPoly.com. You can also go to CanadaPoly.com and pick up a ticket for a live event. The live event is taking place in Streetsville, and the location will be provided to ticket holders. But you can check out a live event. Dr. Patrick Phillips, Sarah C., and Scarlett Martin. I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't know I can't say your last name, and I'm terrible at saying last names. We'll be joining Greg Wycliffe and myself for an uncensored round table. It would be lovely if you could join us. Tickets at CanadaPoly.com. And if you live in Toronto, Mississauga, Milton, GTA, Hamilton, Guelph, Kitchener, Cambridge, it's probably well worth the drive to Streetsville. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.